I own a lot of books. Like, too many books. I'm gonna keep collecting them, and I know this about myself. So, I have to start getting rid of some of the books I've already read. I have to make room on the shelf, for one thing. I know I'm gonna keep collecting them. I can't even really stop myself. If I walk by a pile of books at a yard sale or at a thrift store, I just feel compelled to buy them. Today, I picked out 7 books about the occult. I don't know why I picked this subject in particular, but I did read all of these books, so it's in an area of interest for me. I'm actually a skeptic, and I'm not sure why I'm so interested in the occult. It's sort of a sociological or anthropological interest of mine. I just like people, and I like understanding people's spirituality. So I picked out 7 books. One is about palm reading, there's one about Kabbalah, there's one about Aleister Crowley, there's one about sacred math or sacred numbers, and there's one that's an introduction to shamanism, and then finally one about Nostradamus. If you've enjoyed this video so far, I really appreciate it. Maybe you are interested in one or more of the subjects discussed in these 7 books. Or maybe you're like me, where books themselves hold a uniquely fascinating aesthetic appeal. In any case, you can support me making more videos like this by donating money to the links I provide, or if I haven't sold them already, you might be able to buy the exact copies featured in this video. I'd like to sell all 7 to one buyer, preferably someone with an occult book collection or someone who wants to start a collection like that. You should be able to find copies of these books in various conditions and for various prices. So if I've already sold my copies, or if you just are looking for a better deal, you might still find this video useful. Putting a value on used books is more of an art than a science. Pricing can vary quite a bit, and it's influenced by the authors, the subject matter, trends in the market, and the condition of the individual books themselves. People have strong opinions about the occult, and I'm sure there are some people with much more experience than I have when it comes to buying and selling used books. I would love it if you used the comment section for any questions, corrections, or related thoughts. Bibliophile is a series by Counterintuitive Media. There's a Counterintuitive Media Facebook page and a YouTube channel. And Counterintuitive Media on Instagram is a good way to direct message me. You can also email me at counterintuitivemedia@gmail.com. So let's take a closer look at these books. I want to start with this Aleister Crowley autobiography. It's titled The Confessions of Aleister Crowley, an autobiography edited by John Simmons and Kenneth Grant. Crowley was prolific. He's a novelist, a poet, a magician, and, a mountain climber, a chess master, and a lot of people will recognize this phrase he coined, "do what thou wilt." He was born in 1875 and died in 1947. Editor John Simmons met him in 1945, but Kenneth Grant actually studied under Aleister Crowley. Some of this material was published in 1929 by a publisher called Mandrake Press. This copy is the first edition published by Arcana Books, but an earlier edition in 1979 was published by Routledge and Keegan Paul. The Arcana version is from 1989. I'm zooming in here on the spine and edges of the paperback cover. You can see it has some wear and tear. Most of this is from sitting on a shelf. People have a tendency to pull the book by the spine and slide it along the bottom edge. So it has pretty predictable wear and tear. The pages are pretty discolored, but it's in a way that I kind of like. They're yellow towards the outside and makes the book look pretty old, even though as books go, 1989 doesn't seem that old to me. It has that cool drawing on the inside by Aleister Crowley himself. Most of this book was dictated by Aleister Crowley, who was under the influence of opiates at the time. So, the editors kind of edited out redundancies if Aleister Crowley repeated some of the same stories. You can see there's some watermarks on the side, probably just from humidity. And, any paperback that's been read a lot tends to flare up on the corners like that. It's 2019, so given the fact that it's a 30-year-old book, it's actually in pretty good condition. You can see there's a pretty noticeable crease in the spine, but that's to be expected for a book that's like hundreds and hundreds of pages. It's pushing 900 pages. So I'd say if you looked around for a similar copy, this is about the condition of most copies in existence. Although there might be some people who have a really pristine looking Confessions of Aleister Crowley. That would kind of imply that they didn't actually open and read it, since most of this damage is from sliding it in and out of a bookshelf and, actually reading it. There's just something about a paperback that when you slide it onto a shelf, it has a tendency to warp and bend. And over time, that can do more damage. Let's look at the next book. It's called How the World is Made, The Story of Creation According to Sacred Geometry. It's credited to John Mitchell with Alan Brown, but it's largely the posthumous work of John Mitchell, who died shortly before it was published. This book is about the spiritual meaning of geometric shapes. It's from a publisher in Vermont called Inner Traditions, and this is the first paperback edition from 2012, but there was a 2009 hardcover edition. So the book is 10 years old, but this edition's even younger than that. I really like the color illustrations. Some of them are prints from paintings done as early as 1960. It has a really consistent look to the art. It's beautiful. It's also in great condition. If you look along the outer edges, it just has almost no marks. The spine is in great condition. There's no scratches to any of the artwork. There is a little white dot down by the lower corner. It's probably another book banging into it when it slid in and off the shelf. This is about the condition you might find a book that is this old, which is about 7 or 8 years, I think. That corner is a little folded the way they usually are. But someone's actually opened it a few times. I don't know. All in all, I would say this is what you should expect if a book says good condition. I wouldn't say this is like new because of that corner. But everything else about this book is great. and it's a really cool book. You should check it out. You might not see right away where this book fits into the other 6 when it comes to occult studies. Aleister Crowley's book is actually a really good companion to how the world is made. It gives you a different perspective to see how sacred geometry is a reinterpretation of mathematical and science concepts. It's actually really compatible with Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Aleister Crowley's work was, iconoclastic and well-researched, but based on a different approach entirely. Okay, well, the next book is Shamanism. The World of Shamanism by Roger Walsh. Some people are gonna correct me and say it's pronounced shamanism. In any case, Roger Walsh does a really good job of explaining the role of the shaman in different capacities throughout history and all these different cultures. I really like this book, and this copy is in great condition, except for 3 things. It looks like it sat on a dusty shelf at one point. I didn't buy it new, it was already used, and it has that typical paperback corner problem. On the top corner too, it looks like, someone's held the pages open. And then thirdly, it has this mark on it where maybe a bookstore put a sticker, pricing sticker. I don't remember the sticker being on there when I bought the book, but either myself or someone else rubbed it off, which is about as much stress as I would want to put on the cover. As far as wear and tear, I'm pretty happy with this book. Let's take a look inside. So this copy is from 2011, but that's actually the 5th printing. So the first printing was in 2007. It's a pretty great reference book, but I read it cover to cover. It's really thorough on the subject. In my opinion, Roger Walsh editorializes too much, but it's nothing intolerable, and there aren't too many other books out there that are this comprehensive. Although I haven't read every book on the subject of shamanism. Whoever owned this copy before I did marked it up, but not very badly. They're really light pencil marks. Usually a meaningful quote like this John Milton quote. I could have fixed it with an eraser, but it didn't really bother me, and I didn't want to put any more stress on the book than I had to. It's really well researched. It's a great reference book. It's a good example of a book where you should definitely tell the buyer about the pencil marks or that sticker mark on the cover. Speaking of sticker marks, the dust jacket on this book is almost perfect if it wasn't for that sticker mark. Nostradamus and His Prophecies by Edgar Leone. It's one of the more popular translations from the original French, but you can't exactly say that with confidence because there have been a lot of translations. There's almost nothing wrong with the outside of this book. You could convince me that this was sitting in a bookstore since the publication date. Maybe not when you look at the pages themselves, but the corners of the hardcover and the dust jacket itself are in really good condition. The pages have that faded towards the edge look that, like I said about the Aleister Crowley book, I kind of like that effect when it comes to books about the occult. I'll go more into the age of the book and the publication date in a second, but let's just judge this book on an aesthetic level. So it has those faded pages, and underneath the dust jacket, the book is in almost perfect condition. It has this metallic embossed spine, and it doesn't have any other writing on the outside. It's a really cool book to have in a collection of occult books, if you just judge it for appearance and feel. I don't think you should judge this book by any other standard anyway, because this is a 1982 reprint of a book that was originally translated and published in 1961. It's about 7 years older than the Aleister Crowley book, which is amazing considering the condition it's in. It looks like someone bought this book and literally just put it on the shelf and never touched it again. The Edgar Leone translation is iconic because in the 60s, the marketing push behind this particular version made Nostradamus and his prophecies become sort of a pop culture sensation at the time. And the book isn't just the prophecies, but it's also his will, some personal letters, and a critical assessment of the historical, geographical, and genealogical background of Nostradamus. And that makes this book kind of an all-purpose reference on the subject. But people who are really into Nostradamus will debate which translation is the best. The translation could really influence the way people interpret the prophecies. So if you're really into Nostradamus, you want a few different translations, but this one's a great one. Out of these 7 books, this one is my favorite. Hands down. It's an iconic translation of Nostradamus' prophecies, and if it didn't have this sticker mark on the dust jacket, it would be a near-perfect copy. It's a good example of why books aren't just a storage device for information. It's also a great example of why I called this series Bibliophilia. I wanted to emphasize the value of books as objects. This next book is called Palmistry, The Whole View by Judith Hipskind. This book doesn't go too much into the history or cultural background of palm reading. It's just a how-to guide. It's in good condition, considering it was published in 1986. It has the usual wear and tear from sliding on and off a bookshelf. It doesn't have too much bending up on the corners. And the paper is a lot higher quality than that Aleister Crowley book, so you don't see that fading, even though it was actually printed before the Crowley book. You can see the first printing was 1977, and the third printing is the one shown here. It's 1986. If you wanted to learn to read palms, this would be as good a book as any to start with, but since I'm interested more in the history of the practice, it's not the best book for me. It does have a bibliography at the back, so you could use it as a starting point and find more books on the subject. Okay, so the last book of the 7 is Kabbalah and Criticism by Harold Bloom. The book itself is in really great condition. Compared to all the other paperbacks in this video, there's almost no damage to it at all, except for on this corner it's a little dusty from sliding on the shelf. And I think the reason it's in such good condition is the material it's made from. It's just a really durable, high quality book. You can see it's a really short book, but it's also a really good book. Harold Bloom teaches at Yale, New York University, and Harvard. And he covers a lot of topics, not just religion or the occult. This copy was first published by Continuum in 1981. But before that, it was published in 1975 by Seabury Press. Bloom did a good job of separating his explanation of Kabbalah itself and his own editorialized interpretation. don't know who owned this book before, but there's a little piece of ginkgo biloba leaf in the pages. It didn't seem to leave a mark or stain the page, but the leaf looks really cool. I'm just gonna leave it in there. I really enjoyed Harold Bloom's writing style. Even though I'm a skeptic, he explained his religious views in a way that really appealed to me for some reason. So those are 7 books on the occult that I'm willing to part with. I read them and enjoyed them, but I'd like to find them a new home because I just have way too many books on my shelves. Thanks for watching. This was episode 1 of Bibliophilia. You can support further episodes by liking, sharing, reacting, subscribing, or otherwise promoting Bibliophilia or Counterintuitive Media online. You can also donate money to the links provided or purchase the books described in this video. Thanks for watching.